Hiya, and welcome to the Wise Yourself Up podcast. I am your host, Cardi McGreevy. This podcast is all about healing and talking about healing in a tangible way that brats can connect to. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the intelligence of the body and in particular how the heart can sense things before it happens. I just want to start this week by thanking you for listening, and for anyone who is new, you are so welcome, and I hope you enjoy having a chat with me. It's been so lovely hearing from some of you who have DM'd me on Instagram or sent me a mail. I love knowing who's listening, and it's so nice. There's loads of yous from across the world tuning in, which is just so special. And especially there was a lady called Ellie who created amazing art from Madrid who wrote to me. And then there was Amy from Berlin who used to make me coffee many, many moons ago when I used to work in the drinks industry, and who has probably seen like the whole journey that I went from a total non-yogi to someone who's trying to persuade everyone to do yoga. This week has been pure shite, to be honest. Yeah, I haven't been well, so I've not been happy. And I think it's because it's a really important week in work, and these things happen, don't they, where the words don't collide in the way that you want them to. And yeah, so it's been difficult. So I recorded the podcast last Friday, and last Friday I went for a wee swim at the reservoir. So that's how I'm getting my cold water fix these days. It's actually not that cold, and I'm in for a shock when I get back into the Irish waters. But it is a fix nonetheless. Me and Anna went for a swim, and then we got wine drunk, which is never good. I really can't handle my drink. I am a lightweight. I get sick very easy. And so I definitely felt it the next day. And it was Leishan last Saturday here in London. And I did some yoga, cleaned the house, and just had a chilled one. And then on Sunday, I went out for drinks again. And my immune system just can't handle alcohol, it seems. So I definitely didn't help myself with the busyness of Edinburgh Fringe and then Electric Picnic and then drinking on the bank holiday weekend. So no wonder I got sick. I'm definitely prepping myself up for a sober September. It's also my birthday month in September. So I'm hoping to stay sober from the start of September until my birthday. So pray for me, light a candle. It'll do me the world of good. I know my immune system needs it anyway. I have to actually message Emma and see has she done her sober stint, because I think she was planning on doing 3 or 4 months of sobriety before she goes to Porto in September. So I'll have to check in on her and see how she's doing. But I have her podcast saved on sobriety that she did with 2 girls from Dublin. So hopefully I'll get some inspiration and motivation from that. And if any of you have any tips on staying away from wine, let me know. Also, by no surprise, it's my dad's 2nd anniversary next week. So I also think that could be to do with it too. It being a busy week in work building up to 2nd anniversary and sickness slowing me down, or else I probably wouldn't have been as slow as what I have been this week. I've inhaled Emily in Paris, and oh my god, isn't it terrible? And I just cannot get enough. It's the absolute worst TV. It's a good scrambled egg TV when you don't want to actually have to use your brain cells for anything else. Are you all ready for the start of September? I know people with kids are definitely excited for it with the return to school. And I'm actually returning to school too. My course with Gabor Maté and the compassionate inquiry begins this month. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Having to schedule 2 days of study a week, and yeah, a whole year of learning his method and his ways. So very excited about that, and I'll keep you filled in what comes up for me and what happens. But I'm still absolutely devastated the summer's over, because it's just been the fastest summer ever. Definitely has been. But I think when you move around a lot, because I was in Bali until the end of March, and then I was in Ireland April and May, and I only really got to London in June, so it's still very long. And then we blink and we're in September. The wave effect begins tonight when this goes out, which I'm so excited about. I have very selfishly created something that makes me do the things that really serve me the most in terms of connecting to something bigger, something mysterious and magical, which is the body and breath. There are so many questions that science have yet to answer. And I know I don't know about you, but when I began the journey of yoga and healing, I thought science had all the answers. I thought we knew everything. But the more you dive into this work, the more you realize it's really a guessing game, and every body and every circumstance is so unique. And that's why it's so important that each individual understands their body and understands their normal and the messages they receive, especially as a woman, because women's health is so neglected. So as a woman, you have to, I beg you, we need to do the work ourselves of understanding our bodies, because there is rules. There's always an 80-20 with rules, right? There's always the blips. There's always that 20% where the rule doesn't fit. And that's why it's so important in a world that neglects women's health that you study your own health and take care of it yourself. And that's why I'm so excited to learn from this next group of women who I'm going to be sitting with every morning for breath work, some very brief movement and internal inquiry, so that they can listen to the wisdom that is in their blood and their bones, and the messages that are received in stillness and silence, in a world where it is so hard to be still, so hard to sit in silence. And it's the hardest thing I've ever learned. And I've shared that with you all before. And if anyone's new, I was someone who was diagnosed with CPTSD, which meant that a lot of people who have a lot of traumatic energy in their bodies, it's very hard for them to be still in silence. And that's for most people. And in this course, I teach various tools and practices that help me enter the world of stillness and silence. And I think it's important to taste all the different tools, and you can learn what works and what doesn't work for you, because what works for me doesn't necessarily work for the other. I have designed these courses to begin under new moon skies, so that we're working with the energies of nature, just as we're working with the energies of our bodies, and emotions are forces of nature. If only we got to pick and control and choose what emotions we could feel, but they are, as Rumi said, wise messengers from beyond, and we should treat them with that respect, even if we don't necessarily like them. Just like I didn't like my sickness this week, I definitely feel it was emotional sickness, definitely, as my body remembers what I'm getting closer to in terms of coming up to an anniversary. And so for anyone who doesn't work with the moon, and I will share this again, when I did my first yoga teacher training, that's when I first came across women who worked with the moon. I'd never heard of it. And I thought, oh my God, hippies are really melting, aren't they? Really melting. And that was sort of my attitude. And then the more I listened to the teachings around it, and the more I practiced yoga around it, the more I realized the power that was in it. Because in shamanism, the moon represents feminine energy and the sun represents masculine energy. And just as this world focuses on the importance of masculine energy, and we live in a patriarchy, and the sun is so focused on, and yet the importance of the moon, the importance of trusting in what we can't see, what isn't illuminated, is what the moon stands for. And that's what the feminine represents, trusting in the not doing, as opposed to the masculine and the sun, which is the doing. We can see the importance of the moon being represented in like old sayings, such as she's on her moons, because of the connection between the menstrual cycle and the lunar cycle. It is said before artificial light that women all bled together on the new moon. Now, this could be an old tale, this could be true, I don't know. But it makes sense, right? Because if you spend time with a woman, we all tend to then bleed at the same time, which is mad. It just shows how our bodies are communicating and talking to each other in a way that our cognitive intelligence can't quite comprehend how. And so the moon represents it. It works on a 28-day cycle, and The new moon represents new beginnings. It's the day of rest. It's the day that a woman bleeds. And then the full moon is the time of ovulation. It's sexy time. It's party time. It's all about releasing and stepping into your full power. And that's some of the elements that I work with all year round. And in the wave effect that I teach, and we practice that. And I think that's an important thing to remember, is that so much can change in a month. And I know the months go so fast too, right? We're now in September 2024. But yeah, because if you look at a woman's cycle, just in a month, she can conceive a whole new life, and the miracle that is. And that I always try and remember that when I am thinking about how much can change in 4 weeks. So I think I came across this study, it would have been 2016, 2017 through Tara Brach's podcast, and it really astounded me. And I shared it on my Instagram, so I'll just repeat what the research is that in the research that was conducted by the HeartMath Institute, it's a university that's completely devoted to understanding the intelligence of the body and the body-mind connection. They weren't even studying that the heart could predict the future. They were studying something else. They just wanted to see how the body responded to emotion. And then they found something else in this survey. So what happened was the participants were shown a computer screen, and the computer generated either relaxing photographs, such as like a photograph of a cup or something that wasn't emotionally evoking, and then they generated images that were emotionally evoking, such as kissing or people getting married or babies and things like that. So there was what they called relaxing stimuli and emotionally stimulating pictures. Okay, so that was the two things that they were studying in this piece of research, and they wanted to see how the body responded to it, how the brain and how the whole visceral body responded. But they actually found out something completely different in this piece of research, and it was that the heart responded first and responded before the emotional picture was revealed, which is astounding. And up to 6 seconds before the photo was revealed, the heart was responding. And this supports this debate that the heart knows first, that it can sense first, which is quite amazing. And this makes sense to me because the heart's electric magnetic field can be measured up to 10 feet. Yeah, 10 feet from the heart. So it means that the heart's energy goes so far to pick up what's all around it more than the rest of our body parts. So it makes sense that it's the first part of the body to respond to the external environment. And what this means is if we made the time, and it's one of the famous quotes, is the longest journey we'll ever do is from our head to our hearts, and a life worth living is one that's led from the heart. If we spent more time in our bodies and feeling, then we would be able to sense things before they actually happened, and would be able to prepare ourselves for what's to come and to really know truth. And that sounds a bit out there, but I'm going to give you real examples of this to help. An example I can give you is my friend, right? He was drug dealing at the time, long time ago. He lives a very different life now. And one morning, his dogs were going mental, barking, and he knew that the police were coming, right? He was waiting on getting caught anyway, but so he knew the dogs were going mad. Right enough, the police knocked at the door, and then the dogs ran to his mummy's house and went mental to tell his mum. So the dogs sensed the police coming and warned my friend, and then they also were so intelligent to run and warn his mother. And that shows you, because the dogs don't have cognitive intelligence like us, which is the prefrontal cortex of our brains. They rely solely on their senses, on the intelligence of their body. And this is the work of embodiment. This is the work of just not using our prefrontal cortex for intelligence, but stepping into the senses, which have so much intelligence. And this is the work that this supports, that if we could just take less time thinking, and more time in feeling and being, then we would have access to so much more intelligence, similar to what animals have. And there's so much different poetry, which I'm sure that you have heard of, that supports this, right? There's Einstein who says, I think 99 times and I get no solution, but I think in silence and the answer comes. And then there's Rumi who says, the quieter you become, the more you're able to hear. And this is what I massively believe in, because I spent, 28 years never sitting, couldn't even bear a second of stillness and silence without feeling like my skin was crawling or like I was crawling on broken glass. To now that I teach this, I try and help women come into stillness and silence, because I want every one of us to access that power and intelligence within, because it's so mysterious, so magical, which is why I'm on such a high thinking about this next month together. And I get to listen to all the different experiences that women have and what is going to be revealed to them, which I don't know. I'm on the ride and the mystery along with them. Once we accept and understand that the body is intelligent and that it speaks to us, and we know this through science, right? That 80% of the body, the communication goes up the way to the brain, and the brain communicates 20% down the way, which is why bottom up, what's known as bottom up approaches, works in healing, such as yoga, breath work, rather than talk therapy, because the body has more influence going up the way than down the way. Then the next thing is building trust. It's building trust in what you feel. And it's a real skill to learn. And it just takes time. That's why, again, to do month-long courses where you practice a skill daily, you become better at it. And that's why I really believe in journaling also, because you get to see patterns and trends of how you felt and how you feel in certain circumstances. And you can begin to know then the messages that your body's trying to tell you. That's why a therapist can really help too. And then share with friends, because then they can relate, oh, remember you felt like this before. Because sometimes we don't really remember as well what we've been through or how we've felt. I mean, I've certainly experienced that in grief, where I've said, obviously I've got sick in the past week, and a friend said to me, oh, do you remember you got sick the week before your granny's anniversary too? Sometimes others can remember trends better than what we can. And there seems to be this old indoctrination in the Irish community that if you say things out loud, then it's like you're wishing them to come true. But I really don't believe in that. And I think that's something that we need to decondition from ourselves, because I really believe the teaching in shamanism, which is when you say something, it diminishes its power. When you say a fear out loud, it diminishes its power. Whereas when you hold something inside, it really has control over you and imprisons you in a different way. And that ability just to put it in 2D gives you some freedom. I held a secret inside for a long, long time. I held it inside for 11 years before I shared it with anybody. And I thought the worst thing I could ever do was share it with somebody. And I would rather die than someone know this about me. But yet when I shared it with someone, I felt a bit stone lighter. And so I really urge you, if there's something that aches inside of you, to share it with a friend, to write it down, or to go to a professional who you get to share it with. The next piece of this is we get afraid of saying our fears out loud. So the Irish seems to be the conditioning is keep it inside, it'll never come true. Whereas in shamanism, they say, tell someone and it diminishes its power. In psychology, what they teach is to play it out, because I don't know what your fears are, but probably there is a probability that it could come true, such as your relationship could end. You could lose your job. There could be all these different things that could happen. You mightn't be able to have kids. All these different things that play on our minds. But we can survive it all. Bad things do happen and we can survive. And there was a particular example that I've shared before. And it's one that's always stayed with me, is the one that Tag Rack shared about a woman whose daughter was a heroin addict. And she was so afraid that her daughter would die of her heroin addiction that she always fed her addiction. And then that led to real codependence in the relationship. Whereas the real turning point for the mother was when she accepted that, yes, her daughter could die. And that the grief that she processed through realizing that this fear could come true gave her the strength to put in place boundaries, which actually led to her daughter getting better when this mother stopped giving her money for addiction and actually put in some loving boundaries for herself and her daughter actually got better. Not always the case, these happy endings with these stories, but it's something to remember that boundaries are always very healthy. And when we play with the truth and the different possibilities that life has, it gives us more freedom than just avoidance and putting a big duvet over our issues, which can be our tendency. So coming back to how the heart can sense and the heart can know, there was a girl who shared, who's a friend of mine, that her body knew long before her breakup that it was coming. How many of you have experienced that? I have too. My body doesn't let me sleep. I've shared with you before. When it comes towards a breakup, I can't sleep beside the person, and that's when I know the end is here. My body knows before my mind accepts, and that's actually the words that this friend used, that the body knows if we just make the space to listen. Whereas the mind can be torturous. We can play out so many scenarios, and that's the importance of making time to not just exercise your body and build muscles and all that crap, but to actually move into it and feel into it, and to make the space to sit and listen. And in just 3 minutes, research shows that just 3 minutes of sitting and being and listening makes changes in our brain in just 2 weeks. Whereas like you go to the gym for 2 weeks, you're not going to see no changes. But the neuroplasticity of the brain is so fast that change can happen. That in just 2 weeks of as little as 3 minutes of sitting and meditating and being with yourself can make changes in the brain. What the research shows is that the pathway to the smokehouse of the brain, it thickens from the prefrontal cortex to the reptilian part of the brain, which means that we have more ability to respond than react. The reptilian part of the brain is the old part of the brain, and the prefrontal cortex is the ability to think rather than just react. And one of my favorite stories about how the heart can sense and the body knows is one from my granny. My granny always told this story that the night before my mummy got lifted from the police, she went to do the dishes and she said that the whole sink shook violently and that she couldn't do the dishes, and she went to bed sick because she knew something bad was going to happen. And my mummy got lifted the next morning. And now my granny would never have said, oh, that was my body warning me. She just wouldn't have been able to explain it. She wouldn't have said it was spirits coming to warn her. She wouldn't have said it was God. She just would have told it, as a matter of fact, this weird thing happened that can't be explained. But I think that she felt the vibrations of what was going to come. She got a warning. And that's why I'm so devoted to teaching this, to actually doing the practice myself, because I want to have access to as much intelligence as I can to have these super spidey senses that know before they happen. Like, what a power. And I urge you to learn it too. And I'm so excited for each of you who are on this journey with me and who are wanting to learn and know. I think this is the era of it, right? Of coming back to the intelligence of the body. And that's what somatics is. That's what Chinese medicine teaches, what body mind centering teaches, what Gabor Maté's work contributes to as well, is the body is so intelligent and it holds our whole story. And it's not to say that if you get sick after something happening to you that you're bad at processing emotion, but it can help you understand that it's just a natural part of the body's healing after such trauma. For example, one of my best friends After her sister died, she got loads of chest infections. And it doesn't mean that she wasn't processing her grief, but it makes sense that she would get so sick after such a huge heartbreak in her life. Yeah, and so that's the point. It doesn't mean that our bodies won't show the toll that life has on us, but it means that we can respond and care for our bodies in a better way once we know how wise they are and make the time to listen. Gabor Maté says, not everyone who represses their emotions will get sick, but everyone with an autoimmune disease represses their emotions, which I believe in. But it's not to say that anyone deserves to get sick. It's part of a bigger picture, right? We live in a world that doesn't give us time to sit with ourselves. And that's why it's a radical act. It's an act of activism. It's an act of rebellion in this patriarchy, in this capitalist society, to make the time to sit with yourself and get to know yourself. I'll share different parts of the body just briefly just to finish. So the heart consents, the heart loves, the heart breaks. It's very visceral sense, right, isn't it? We all know that feeling of heartbreak. And I remember my granddad, my granddad never talked about his heart, but when my granny died, he said, my heart's breaking. My heart. It was a very physical, visceral thing that he felt, which really stuck with me at the time. Our lungs are linked to grief, and that's why they're the organ of transformation, because they also transform air. Air is a completely different chemical combination when it enters our body and as it leaves, and grief transforms us. And that's why a lot of people cry when we consciously breathe, because grief is held in the lungs. Our digestive system is because the digestive system accepts food, it absorbs it, and then it releases what we don't need. And that's why we can get stuck here, because when we struggle to accept what has happened in life, when we struggle to absorb what we need to, and then that's why a lot of people have constipation and IBS. It's that process of accepting and letting be and letting go of what we need to. Our legs are connected to how we support ourselves, how we are supported in life, how we are connected to the world around us. And our arms is how we connect. They're an extension from our hearts. From our hearts, that's how our arms grew. It's also connected to protection. That's why a lot of women have issues around their wrists in terms of strength and shoulders and arms, because just traditionally we weren't taught to protect ourselves. We didn't have that right. We weren't able to, we weren't taught to, we weren't allowed to. And that's why it's really important as a woman that you exercise that right of getting strong, of protecting yourself, of learning to implement boundaries. So this may have been a higgledy-piggledy episode yet once more, but I hope it's inspired you to know that your body is so intelligent, so mysterious, so magical, in ways that can't be explained. And there's a quote from, I think it's Breath Space, a guy called James runs that collective, and it says, one of his quotes is, let go of that fear you call logic. Because we can get so attached that everything has to make sense in life. It definitely does not make sense. There is a lot of no rhyme and reason, and you just have to get to learn to understand your own rhythm. And yeah, so that's my crack for the next month, is really diving deep with this group of women, making the space to learn to settle the mind, learn how to feel safe. Listen to your body, which holds so much wisdom, that knows whether you should break up with your partner or stay, that knows whether you should move to a new city or stay, knows what your passion and your creations are. And everybody has something that they want to create in this world. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you are inspired to learn to be still in silence, and maybe you're like me and it'll take many, many years for that to take form, but we all move at different speeds. The more resistant you are, the more you're like me, and it'll take many, many years, but it's so worth the journey. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a really gorgeous start to September, and that you make some time to plant some seeds. Our brains are wired for fear, so it's so important that we, with intention, fantasize and dream. And I hope you tune in next week. Thank you so much for listening. I have been your host, Conor McGreevy, and this has been the Wise Yourself Up podcast.